your manager schedules weekly check-ins during your PIP, is that a red flag or a beige flag?
Oh, yeah. So that's definitely a beige flag. And honestly, it's a good one. It means they're invested enough to help you succeed. So if you don't even have to ask to schedule check-ins and your manager's doing that, definitely a beige flag.
Yeah, I got a good manager there. And how can this person turn it into a green flag? All right, we've heard the three words before, and it's something many of us kind of dread hearing: a performance improvement plan, otherwise more popularly known as a PIP. It often arrives at the toughest time in your job. You're already stressed, you're stretched thin, maybe you're even questioning your own abilities. And once you receive one, you're probably worried about what comes next for your future and your career. But while a PIP might feel like a setback, it can actually signal a turning point. In this episode, we're here to help make sense of what being put on a PIP really means, what to expect, and how you can turn the situation into an opportunity for professional growth and definitely getting back on track. So, here to guide us through this conversation is Nicole Belyna. Nicole is the director of talent here at SHRM. And Nicole, you are actually one of the hosts of SHRM's Honest HR podcast. This feels like a crossover episode with all things work.
Thanks so much for having me in.
We're happy to have you. I know you have, over 15 years of experience in your area, so this is really great. I know you've dealt with this type of stuff before, so we're so happy you're going to be able to guide us through this. It definitely can be alarming, but it doesn't have to be as scary as people might make it out to be. So we're going to break it down. But let's start things off with getting the facts from an organization's perspective. What exactly is HR's goal when they are giving someone a PIP?
Yeah, that's a great question, Anne. And honestly, the goal of a PIP is not to catch somebody doing something wrong. It's really to create clarity and set a super clear expectation. And so from an HR perspective, a performance improvement plan, or a PIP, as we call them, should really set a clear path forward. And we shouldn't look at it as a countdown clock to the end. So I think that that's really important. It's important to identify what's not working, put real guardrails in place, and make sure that the employee knows what success looks like and how they can get there. So when it's done well, a PIP it's really a nice coaching tool, and it shouldn't be a punishment. It should be specific, time bound, these things, right? Supported by regular good feedback, resources. And the goal is really to help the person improve and stay rather than fast tracking them out the door.
And when you hear the term, whenever I hear PIP, I think it kind of sounds like a medical term that you have to go to the doctor's office, get something done, and you're like, oh, I have to get a PIP. Oh, this sucks. Oh my gosh, I'm not going to like this. But really, at the end of the day, it's something to help you improve your career or in that scenario, improve your health when you have to go to the doctor's appointment. So there are good intentions here to help you, make this pivot. So let's get a little honest here with our honest HR host, Nicole. So give it to us straight. What does an employee really need to know about PIPs that their employer might not be exactly clarifying or telling them straightforward?
Yeah. So real talk, sometimes a PIP is a sign that the organization has lost confidence. That's not always the case, but employees deserve to know that a PIP can go either way. So if you're on one, you should absolutely take it seriously. But this is also your opportunity to demonstrate accountability, be curious, and show resilience. And I know that's not easy, right? It feels, as you said, you compared it to a medical procedure. It feels serious, and it is. But it doesn't have to be the end of the road, as I mentioned earlier. And so it's important to ask questions, as an employee. Make sure that you're documenting your progress. And you shouldn't assume that it's hopeless. I really want to drive. If I could drive at one point, over the next 30 minutes, I don't want you to assume that it's hopeless. But also don't assume that your organization is going to do all the work for you. So as I said, document your progress, request examples, request feedback, And you really want to be able to show, throughout the process that you've made a visible effort and you've engaged every step of the way.
And it's really, you're trying to find the balance on the spectrum. Like you said, it's good to take it seriously. I think I mentioned this in our conversation before the episode started. I knew someone who was put on a PIP, and he did not take it as seriously. Unfortunately, he did end up losing his job, and that was a real learning experience for him. So now he knows, in many different ways what to do differently, how to handle that. And then there's people like me who jumps to worst case scenarios, who almost panics because I'm one of those people who thinks, oh my gosh, I do a good job. But if somebody looks at me the wrong way, what happened here? So it's very easy for people to go the other way and panic. So do you have, I know you touched on, different ways to kind of remain calm a little bit and strategize. What should people really do in those moments when the panic settles in real fast and they don't know what to do because this is the first time they've received a PIP?
Yeah. It's easier said than done, but don't panic, right? And so I would take a breath, make sure that you're listening to the conversation, and don't let fear take over. I mean, many of us get, this sort of anxiety will get, paralyzed, and it's like all of a sudden you don't know how to do your job, right? And so panic never helps. So let's keep that in mind, take a deep breath and start by reading the document very carefully. Understand what's being asked of you, understand what the timeline is, and most importantly, you want to understand what success looks like. What do you need to do, to successfully get through this PIP? And then, schedule the meeting with your manager, with HR, if you have any clarifying, if you need those clarifying questions, you should be asking questions. If someone's not telling you, if your manager or someone in HR is not setting these clear expectations, be ready to ask clarifying questions. Can we walk through what right looks like? What resources are available to me to succeed? And those things show ownership. They also can help you be successful, right? And from there, just treat it like a project plan, track your milestones, communicate your progress weekly, document your weekly progress, and use this as a moment to rebuild trust in yourself, rebuild, and maybe it's rebuilding trust in yourself, and confidence with you, but also obviously with your manager.
This is a situation where you may be really stressed out, but there is a lot in your control here with how you move forward with those concrete steps like you just brought up. So thank you so much for walking us through that, to let people know that there are ways to take those first steps to make it better for both you and the employer. So let's keep the advice flowing here with the fill in the blank kind of exercise. I'll have you complete the statements that I'll throw out to you. So I'll give a little pause and then you can just hop right in there. Okay.
All righty.
Awesome. Okay. So the biggest myth I should know about PIPs is.
I would again stress that they are not always the end of the road. And they're not. I have seen employees turn things around. I've even seen employees who have gone on a PIP and within 12 months, they've been promoted.
And to discuss the details of my PIP, the first person I should meet with is
your manager.
Yeah. Very straightforward. And lastly, the most important question I should be asking myself if I'm on a PIP is.
Let's see. I would say, are you willing to and are you able to make the changes that your role requires? So that's really what it comes down to, both skill wise and mindset wise. People who successfully come out of PIPs, it's not just the skill and capability, right? But it's also oftentimes shifting your mindset, and saying, I have the curiosity to do this. I am resilient enough to shift my mindset and perhaps do my work differently from how I've been doing it.
So for this next segment, I'm going to share a few scenarios an employee could face, just one I mentioned earlier, and ask your advice for how they can approach each situation and successfully move forward. Ready to jump into this one?
All right, let's do it.
Awesome. So, scenario number one, the high performer who I just mentioned, who is suddenly struggling. This employee has a history, of exceeding expectations at work. They get great feedback, especially from their direct manager. But lately, they've been missing maybe several major deadlines, and that could be due to personal issues. Their home life is strained. They just took on some caregiving responsibilities. There's a lot going on, which we know everybody's going through personal things every day. And colleagues also say they're more withdrawn in meetings and not as collaborative as they used to be. So everybody's kind of noticing a little bit here. As a result, they've been put on a PIP. So, how can this type of employee, approach this situation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of candor just overall, right? But I think some candor and context in this type of a situation can go a long way. And so, this is where empathy matters. Hopefully your manager, while they may be putting you on a PIP, is also trying to gain some context to understand, you know, you're a superstar and all of a sudden, we're seeing some changes in your behavior. And so there may be things going on in your personal life, and there are things that your manager or your organization can do to help you in that way. But then there is also the issue that you're having performance issues, right? So there's kind of two different paths here that you're navigating, that your manager's navigating, that your organization's navigating. So I think it's important to kind of remember that. Um, so with that said, you don't necessarily have to overshare. But it is good to provide a little context to help your manager understand what's driving the change.
Right.
If you can ask for some flexibility where possible, and maybe that's, adjusting your timelines, maybe some short-term workload shifts, some temporary help. It depends, right? It depends on the situation. If you're a high performer, if historically you've been a high performer, your organization and your manager are going to want to retain you. And they're just trying to kind of dig in to understand what's going on. But also, if you're a high performer, your output, there's a level of expectation there too. So they just really need to see that engagement and the accountability. So, in this case, I would use it as a chance to kind of reset expectations, take it as an opportunity to rebuild your rhythm and get back into the groove.
Okay, let's jump into scenario number two, kind of opposite of the spectrum here, the chronic underperformer. This employee has not had the best track record at work and consistently struggles to meet their goals and even their deadlines. And oftentimes these projects don't get completed on time. And of course, what does that do? Domino effect. It strains the rest of the team who has to pick up the slack. So now, because of all of that, this person's on a PIP. What should they do to try and turn things around? Because this feels like maybe a heavier lift here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, very different scenario. This person's never been a high performer. Hopefully they won't be surprised by this conversation. Um, and and so, if your performance isn't where it should be, you can again use the PIP as a roadmap. I really always see the PIPs as roadmaps. Don't argue, don't make excuses. That's really just going to kind of slow your progress, and it just makes you sound like you lack accountability. But instead, as we mentioned earlier, focus on what's within your control. Control those controllables, whether it's time management, whether it's the communication, whether there's opportunity to build your skills and ensure that follow through. Those are the things that you can control. And certainly you can ask your manager, what's one thing I could do this week to make a visible improvement? It's those small, consistent changes, that little bit of progress that can speak volumes. And so even if it doesn't result in staying with the company long term, it at least builds your reputation and readiness for whatever's next.
Exactly. And it's so important to remember this. This can all be emotionally driven. So, if you get caught up in that and you try to defend yourself too much, it can look, like you said, like you're not being accountable, and it's not super professional, can leave a bad taste in everybody's mouth. So that's super important to remember, the accountability and just asking questions on how to do better. if you need that guidance, of course.
Yeah. And that's a great point. Like, that's one thing I would say is, even if someone's a chronic low performer, I hate to kind of label any people that way, but maybe they're not in the right role, right? Whatever the case may be, having a great attitude can go a long way, right?
And I think it applies to our last scenario. The workers struggling with the widening skills gap in a fast-changing industry. We've been talking about this a lot here at SHRM about trying to upskill, reskill, keep up with what's going on. So here we have an employee who's been succeeding in their role for a few years. However, their company recently went in a different direction using new technology, programs, and even some platforms. Everyone's got to adapt super quick here. They have to expand those skill sets. They have to keep up with all of it. But this person, unfortunately, is just falling behind their peers, and they've been put on a PIP, and now their confidence is really shaken. They feel incompetent in a field that they really just once excelled at and felt really good about. So what can they do here to bounce back? It's a little more of a unique situation.
It is, and it could happen to anybody. As you mentioned, with the pace of technology changing, it could happen at any moment, right? Your company implements this brand new technology. You've been using the same technology for, quite some time. Um, is tricky. And so I think the key here is humility plus a willingness to take action. And so admit there's a gap and then be proactive, identify training opportunities. Perhaps you can shadow someone who has grasped the technology quickly and, uses it very well. Ask for opportunities to learn whatever that looks like in a formal, informal way. So it's not necessarily about being perfect, but in this case, I think with skills gap opportunities, it's more about showing the effort and the curiosity. We just talked about how attitude can go a long way. And so, employers are going to notice when someone says, I'm committed to catching up. And that shift in mindset can turn that PIP into an opportunity for continued growth, for sure.
Hey everyone, we'll get right back into the conversation. But first, for sure members tuning into this episode, we have an exclusive bonus, a comprehensive toolkit designed to help you navigate every aspect of employee performance management, including PIPs. The online resource covers everything from setting clear expectations and conducting evaluations to providing actionable feedback. Plus, you'll find some sample forms for issuing PIPs. If you're watching on YouTube, just click the link above to get instant access or find the link in this episode's description. This toolkit is just one of the many benefits of being a SHRM member, so be sure to take advantage of this valuable resource. Now, back to the episode. All right, awesome. We're going to jump into our next segment. We're going to play a quick game of red flag, beige flag. If you've been on TikTok or social media, you know that a lot of that is about dating. The red flags, as our producer Bannon would say, you in danger, girl. If anybody knows Ghost with Whoopi Goldberg, that's what she says. There's also the beige flags, like we said, that might be good to take pause and take notice there, but it's not necessarily super concerning for that. So we're going to jump in and try to apply this here in the relationship of your career in common situations associated with PIPs. We're going to get your hot take, Nicole, on whether the employee should read them as a red flag or beige flag. And then we'll quickly chat about how an employee can turn that situation into a green flag, because we like to see that. You ready?
All right. I love it.
All right. So first scenario is your manager schedules weekly check-ins during your PIP. Is that a red flag or a beige flag?
Oh, yeah. So that's definitely a beige flag. And honestly, it's a good one. It means they're invested enough to help you succeed. So if you don't even have to ask to schedule check-ins and your manager's doing that, definitely a beige flag.
Yeah, I got a good manager there. And how can this person turn it into a green flag?
Yeah. You can come prepared for those meetings. We talked about tracking your update, bringing updates, tracking your progress, bringing some examples of success, asking questions. And so, treat the check-ins as progress reviews rather than, an interrogation.
Gotcha. And is it a red flag or beige flag if HR comes in and offers you a mentor during your PIP?
Um, Honestly, I mean, it's a beige flag, and really it's a green flag. To offer you a mentor means that the company really wants to invest in you. So I really wouldn't take it any other way um, than that.
And so after being placed on a PIP, you get vague feedback with like hardly any examples. Are we seeing red or are we seeing beige here?
Yeah, so that's definitely a red flag. You can't improve on what you don't understand. And, the saying feedback is a gift. And I truly believe that, even if it's constructive feedback and maybe it's feedback that you don't want to hear. Um, and so I I will always tell people managers and employees PIPs are a collaborative effort. And so, while yes, it is up to the employee to hit those milestones and provide examples of their progress and things like that. As a people manager, you certainly have an obligation to your team and somebody who's on a PIP to help them succeed as best you can. And that could be things very, very simple like scheduling those regular check-ins, giving very specific feedback. You did this really well. I think, you can still improve here. Those are very simple things that people managers should be doing with their employees, even if they're not on a PIP. So, just make sure that if you're not getting the feedback that you feel like is helpful, that you ask for specific examples and maybe put them in writing, right? Send a recap of your email. Send a recap in an email after your meeting, um, or say, hey, could you give me a few examples of what success looks like here?
Great way to turn it into a green flag very easily. And I love the collaboration effort. It's not just one side or the other. You both have to work for this. Okay, so we're going to wrap things up with a couple questions submitted by our audience. Each week, we ask our newsletter subscribers to submit questions for an upcoming episode. And we actually got some really good ones for this topic. So, are you ready to jump in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Wonderful. So, to our audience tuning in today, be sure you're subscribed. You'll find the sign up link in our episode description, and your response to our question of the week could actually be featured in an upcoming episode. So, we really love hearing from you guys. So, our first question is, we recently introduced PIPs to our organization, but now that we have, we've seen an uptick in submissions. This is a good question. How can people managers make a distinction between someone who should actually be on a PIP versus someone who may just need a little extra support, such as coaching? And if they just need coaching, how does that look different than a PIP?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Really, really important. And first and foremost, I'm going to get on my people manager soapbox a little bit and say, you know, it is the responsibility of people managers to provide perpetual coaching. Those conversations should be ongoing, not just when you do a great job and not just when, you've made a mistake. It should be both, right? Ongoing. So there is no question, right? Whether Anne is doing great or Anne has an area to improve. And so, coaching should always come first. A PIP is a more formal coaching process, right? It's
Right.
part of a more formal approach. Coaching is developmental. And so if an employee can perform but needs help doing it, that's a coaching opportunity. And that could be something in the moment, right? Like just a quick conversation, just a quick exchange between you and me. If they won't perform despite support and coaching, continuous coaching, right? That's when a more formal approach like a PIP might be more appropriate. And so coaching focuses on growth and skill development. The PIP focuses on correcting some sustained performance issues. And so the difference is intent and urgency. Um, I think that's probably the easiest way that I would describe it.
That's a great distinction, and it's important to understand the weight that, a PIP might carry, whether it's to someone emotionally or to their career, so it's not an easy or light decision. for a people manager to make. So that distinction is super important to keep in mind. So we got a second question. This says, what suggestions do you have for people managers when communicating a PIP to their employee? As in, how should they involve HR? Do they give their employee a heads up? Really, what should the conversation include? This is a really great question.
Yeah, it is a really good question. You know, don't surprise your employee. They should never hear about a performance issue for the first time during a PIP conversation. That really is a reflection of your leadership. And so people managers should be leading with clarity. I talked about perpetual coaching as a people manager, and explain why it's happening, what success looks like, how you'll support them, so giving them that clarity. I think you also have to help them understand um, the gravity of the situation, right? The seriousness of it. As we've shared multiple times throughout our conversation, it's not necessarily the end of the road, but also we shouldn't trivialize it. They need to understand that this is, an agreement, a collective effort that we're working on here, to make sure that we're improving their performance. And so, um, I would involve HR early, to ensure that the approach is fair, that there's consistency, and, that there's those regular check-ins. And, HR can help you as a people manager create a PIP that, is aligned with PIPs in similar type of situations across your organization. So, you're not creating a PIP that is, um, kind of unique or maybe above and beyond what the organization has done for other people in those types of situations. So, again, the goal is not to simply deliver a document, but, to help bridge a road, back to good performance.
Love it. Love it. And thank you so much for walking us through this. I feel like maybe the term PIP is maybe a little less scary for our audience, whether they're in the HR profession, the people manager role, or the employee role. And it's just so important, like we said, to understand what's in your control, what you can do, and a good attitude just really carries you far. So thank you so much, Nicole, for walking us through this, bringing in your expertise from SHRM and your podcast hosting skills from SHRM as well.
Thank you so much, Anne. It was a pleasure to join you today.
Pleasure as always. All right, that's all for this week. We'll catch you next time. If you enjoyed our conversation today, be sure to subscribe wherever you enjoy your podcast so you never miss a new episode. Also, did you know All Things Work is more than a podcast? That's right, we're also a weekly newsletter that includes in-depth articles and the latest research from SHRM to keep you in the know. Just head to shrm.org/allthingswork to sign up. Plus, follow SHRM on social media to view the latest clips and join the conversation on game-changing topics that are redefining the world of work.
SHRM.